My guest is James Brown, Sports Broadcasting Hall of Famer, three-time Emmy Award winner. He anchors the NFL Today on CBS, along with analysts Matt Ryan, Bill Cowher, J.J. Watt, and Nate Burleson. JB is a graduate of Harvard University, where he was a three-time All-Ivy League selection in basketball. He's a member of the Harvard Basketball Hall of Fame. He'll be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences at the 45th Annual Sports Emmy Awards ceremony on May 21st in New York City. JB, it is an honor to have you on Sports Business Radio. How are you?
Wow. Hey, Brian, first of all, good to talk with a friend from back in the day, and too humble to even hear some of those things you were taking off, because I have refused to allow myself to really focus on them. I guess it is probably accurate to say I still have a free agent's mentality about what I do, never allowing oneself to get confident, overly confident, etc. And it probably goes back to being cut by the Atlanta Hawks, not getting an opportunity to realize my dream of playing professional basketball. Pete Maravich, the great star back then, God bless him, we were the best of friends. And I'll never forget him saying, JB, my gosh, you can really play. Just keep doing things, and as you've been doing them, and it's all going to work out well. And a week later, Cotton Fitzsimmons, the coach, calls me into his office, and I'm thinking he could only call to congratulate me on the play. And he says, I'm going to let you go. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And when you size it up, and ball players know other ball players. But you know what? The life lesson out of that for me, Brian, was this. And I know in my heart of hearts that, not that I didn't work hard, but it's important to work smartly. You know, there's that old expression, practice makes perfect. And we all know that that's not accurate. We know what it means. It's perfect practice makes perfect. Well, I failed to do all of the things that were necessary in order to advance. And my mantra from that point forward is that I would never allow an opportunity to pass me by for which I was ill prepared. Maybe an outgrowth of that is the other expression that we've all heard, is that when an opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So I've never allowed myself the comfort of thinking that one has arrived, but to keep going. I hope that's from the heart, and I hope that's reflective of the attitude that I have.
You have a wonderful attitude. I have to let our listeners know I met JB when I was a student broadcaster at Loyola Marymount University, the team with Paul Westhead, Hank Gathers, Bo Kimball. And you were calling a game on CBS, one of the great basketball games of all time in college basketball, Loyola Marymount University against Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Jackson, and LSU in Baton Rouge. That's when we first met. And look, I was a student. I was a nobody. And James Brown was a mentor to me, and someone who would call me on the phone and was a role model. And you didn't have to do that. And I've been doing this show now for 20 years, JB. It's in large part because of inspirations like you and people who paved the way for me. So before we get started with talking about your career, I just wanted to thank you for being such a kind person. And I was so looking forward to this conversation with you again today.
Ryan, my daughter has asked me to retire this expression, and I can't, because there are too many situations that come up that make this most appropriate. I'm too dark to blush, but I am blushing to hear that, because you know what, Brian, that is a paying it forward to people who helped me to get into this business. And it's so humbling to hear that I've not forgotten that. I've heard more stories that I've completely forgotten, whether it was helping somebody, an elderly woman who had a flat tire on the road, and I stopped. And in this day and time, you know, you have to be so leery about having a second thought about if you should do that. And again, the crazy environment that we're in. But I'll never forget when I broke into television, not having had communications courses. They didn't offer those in undergrad, or even any on-the-job experience. I learned everything on the job, and I'll never forget these veteran videographers and editors answering the question when I ask, what do I need to do to learn this craft well? I've always been a team-oriented person. You can't help but be that as the oldest of 5 kids in the family. But they said, JB, when you get into an edit booth, ask that editor's input. If you're out in the field shooting a story, ask that videographer what he or she thinks, because they have forgotten more about this business than you will know. And I have always done that to this day. So I am thrilled to know that there was some small part played in what you're doing, and that you're doing what you wanted to do and enjoyed, and clearly have quite the reputation. Congratulations, Brian.
Well, thank you so much. Congratulations to you on this Lifetime Achievement Award. You have such an amazing body of work in your career. But let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned you were cut by the Atlanta Hawks. I'm actually good friends with John Wetzel, who was on that team. And he says hello. I told him I was going to be talking to you. How did you transition from being an elite athlete? I mean, you were one of the greatest high school players to come out of DC. You played for Morgan Wooten. You go from athlete to now a Hall of Fame broadcaster. How do you make that transition? And, it's hard for a lot of people, JB, to say, you know what? I can't be in the NBA, but I'm going to become a Hall of Fame broadcaster.
First of all, wow. Would you please tell John Wetzel hello back? Boy, do I remember him well. And I'm certainly glad that I didn't mention any names there, because the one guy that I think I certainly more than held a candle to, but a good guy, and there was no fault of his own. And I remember all of those stars: Lou Hudson, Jimmy Walker, I believe his name was.
Yep.
Steve Bracey, all of these names that many people may not recall. And these were veteran guys who were there. And they were all very, very helpful and encouraging. A tough physical brand of basketball. But to go from that to this, I'd like to think the immediate thought that came to mind were lessons that I learned first and foremost from my mother and father, God bless them, about success is in their equation 90%, maybe 90% perspiration, putting the time in, but to do it right. And that's why they said they wanted the 5 of us kids to enjoy success in the game of life. And that meant being rooted in a solid, firm academic foundation. Carry that forward with Morgan Wooten. He helped to instill in all of us to internalize the understanding that fundamentals will always serve you well. And no matter what God-given skills you had as a player, as a great leaper, shot blocker, any of those things, that had to be grounded in a solid base of fundamentals. So fundamentals will serve you well. So as I was breaking into the broadcast business, I must have asked all 300 employees at the station, give me a little bit of insight on this. And Brian, I worked on those things. When I went out to cover high school football games in the rain, I was out there logging every detail. But I had a woman who was going to be weighing in on Life Achievement Award night. She was given the responsibility by the GM and the lead programming person, who said, make him a broadcaster. And she pulled her hair out, figuratively speaking, walking me through the basics. I internalized all those basics, maybe not conscientiously aware that many today who have gone through communications courses, TV and radio, focus, the whole 9 yards. I wanted to make certain I was checking every box and did it properly, and learn from that. And I paid rapt attention. I was diligent about being able to capitalize on that opportunity, and so thankful for that. And maybe the best advice that was given to me about being on air was my first producer with the then named Washington Bullets. His name is Sheldon Shemer, Shemer. And he said, JB, when that light is on that camera, you look at that camera and let the people at home see through your eyes and see your heart to know that it is genuine. And even when you make mistakes, which I did a number of in that first year, people are willing to forgive you while you're learning along the way. And I've never forgotten that, Brian. I hope that makes sense.
Tell you what, you follow that advice to a T, because when I look into your eyes, you are genuine, you are authentic, you are warm. Like any set you sit on, I feel like we're sitting around the campfire and you're leading the conversation and you do an excellent job. Were there any role models as broadcasters when you were first coming up that you looked at and said, you know, I'm paying attention to what they're doing?
From a local perspective, yes, names that many people may not recognize. I worked with one of the all-time great local sports anchors in television history, Glenn Brenner, who passed away many years ago from brain cancer. He was excellent. I don't have the comedic wit that he had, but he found a unique way of being able to deliver sports to a broad audience, and to the degree that he made it in everyday terms. For instance, Manute Bol, I'm sure you remember that name, the
Sure.
7'6" 7'7" Dinka tribesman who the Washington then named Bullets brought to their team. And the way he introduced him to the viewing audience was saying to the uninitiated, male and female, was like he was a human windshield wiper, you know, in terms of, and people could get that. And that's how they grasped a hold of it. So I tried to keep that in mind when I was explaining things, doing sports, Brian, that I hadn't done before, which is another part of the story, but to make it relevant to people as well, too. So Glenn Brenner, Bryant Gumbel was one of the best interviewers, along with Ted Koppel of ABC News. Loved them as interviewers. And Ted Koppel, who had a sense of humanity. You remember help me out, Brian, with the Dodgers, who sadly put his foot in his mouth when Ted Koppel had him on the air.
Oh, I know who you're talking
You know
about.
who I'm,
Yep. Yep.
Al Campanis. Al
Yes.
Campanis. And Ted Koppel tried to give him an opportunity. He said, in essence, you know, this is what it sounds like to me in terms of the era that you were growing up in, Al,
Mhm.
and minorities weren't getting opportunities. But let me give you an opportunity to kind of clean it up if that's not what you meant. He gave him another opportunity, but unfortunately, Mr. Campanis, God bless him, was a product of his times. So that helped me to understand you can still have a sense of humanity about you, as opposed to engaging in conversations, interviews where you want to play gotcha. And that certainly fit my personality. You follow what I'm saying, Brian?
I absolutely do. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying if you're doing an interview with someone, you know, be authentic, make them feel comfortable, don't come after them like it's a gotcha, and they're going to open up with you, right?
That's what has been my experience. Now, to be clear, as you well know, I've been incredibly blessed and humbled to be able to do work on the news side of the house as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thoroughly enjoy that because I think it speaks to a deeper sense of curiosity that I have that should not be marginalized, colonized just in sports, because the interest runs across the spectrum. And I remember doing an interview for 60 Minutes with Michael Vick, and many people in our business were like, oh my gosh, okay, so here they've got an African American athlete and they've got an African American host of a football show who's going to be interviewing him. Oh boy, these are going to be a bunch of softball questions thrown to him. They were not mindful that back in local TV, I got a chance to do news, sadly, on the heels of the death of Len Bias.
Mm.
So I was in the A block of every newscast because I was talking with the family that I knew and getting the questions answered, but also being properly sensitive to what they were going through at the time. So there was that delicate balance that you wanted to maintain, because even day one, when I went over to the house the day of and a horde of press were outside, the biases let me come in the house, but I didn't go in asking a lot of questions, Brian. I basically was observing
Mm-hmm.
and asking human interest questions, but more consoling, based on the circumstances, and a time, and indicated that I would like to come back to talk about it more. But they gave me everything I wanted, and I was able to relay that, play that back to a wider audience in terms of what that home environment was like to a mother who had just lost her son. I'm not going to go in there sticking a microphone in front of her and asking a bunch of insensitive kinds of questions. So I learned that on the job, and it paid dividends when I got to do the 60 Minutes piece with Michael Vick, visiting him in Leavenworth prison,
Hmm.
knowing that all the magazine shows wanted to talk with him and to get the story. And his agent was telling him he needed to charge money for some of those interviews. When I met with him one-on-one, I said, Michael, the only reason I'm here is because I heard you give your last interview, press conference, if you will, before being sent here to Leavenworth. I think I heard your heart. I'm here to find out what's in your heart about this situation. And I need you to tell me the truth. This is not a puff piece. This is not a profile. This is a hard interview where I've got hard questions to ask. To his credit, he said, I owe answers to those hard questions. I said, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, I'll be more than glad to do the interview for 60 Minutes. Now, maybe I deviated from my role as a reporter. I'll acknowledge that. But I felt it was the right thing to do. I said, Michael, the worst thing that you could do is to charge a dime for this interview. There may be other magazine shows who are offering you money to do this. We don't pay, because your answers at a paid interview for your services will be viewed through that lens for the rest of your life. You need to, now I'm giving him the advice that my producer gave me with the bullets. You need to look into that camera and let folks see your heart. And even those who won't forgive you, you need to speak the truth, because that's the only thing that's going to help you if you desire to get back in the game, that there's genuine remorse. And I felt that that was the case when we did the interview. He gave those honest answers. We shut out all the outside noise, particularly me, from jaded press members who thought I was going to make it a softball interview, but I didn't. And that honesty served him well. I'll close it. I know, guys, only because I know you, I'm running off at the mouth. He gave 2 years service to the Humane Society, which they do with those who are engaged in cockfighting, dog fighting, or whatever, to go back to their neighborhoods, their environment, and to dissuade youngsters from engaging in that kind of lifestyle. He gave them a 2-year commitment. Brian, he's still doing it because of the depth of his resolve and repentance. And that speaks volumes. God, I was way too long-winded, but that's one of the real serious points of growth in my career. And a lot of that comfort came from having worked on real sports with Brian Gumbel. Didn't know I was going to have an opportunity to work with a guy that I admired so, but his show was one of the best magazine shows on television, not just sports, best period. And I got, many years of experience at doing that, and it was a good thing.
One of the things our listeners really like is process. They love hearing from the greats like yourself. So let me talk to you about process. When you're getting ready to do the NFL Today on CBS, and you've got your analyst there, and it's on Sundays, and we're all watching it, walk us through the week leading up to Sunday. What's your process? And then are you guys meeting during the week? Are you only meeting on Sunday morning before the games? What does that look like, JB?
Number one, to stay as informed as I possibly can, which means it's, as you well know, it's 24/7. And consistent with what you're doing, which has got to be a blessing, you cover sports, figures, personalities, pundits, the intelligentsia across the spectrum. So you've got a wide swath of things. That's got to make your job pretty doggone interesting from my humble perspective. So to stay informed, listen to the people that I respect, and maybe some that I'm not particularly crazy about, but I may glean something from their sports shows on a daily basis. Be informed. Number two, Clearly, I know what the A or B games are that are coming on our air that week. So there's some focus towards that audience that we have. But you got to know the league in general. Number three, take advantage of the resources that I have. Going back to that lesson from local television, I've got guys who coached and or played the game. Bill Cowher did both, who have forgotten more football than I'll ever know. So during the week, I will sound some things off of them because they will tell me, JB, that's what many people are latching onto, but that's not relevant to this week. And here's the reason why. And they'll give me reason so that we can focus and chisel our comments and get the insight. Number four, we recognize that in the world of 24/7 sports, there's nothing new by the time we get to Sunday. What's going to be more important is the opinion, the insight, the information that our analysts, our co-hosts deliver. So therefore, I want to make certain that I am well prepared to ask the most relevant and pertinent questions of them. And coming off of conversations with them during the course of the week, I know where they're going. So my job is to ask. I've seen some in my position who may want to come off as if they're the know-it-all talking football esoteric. Well, they're going against Jerry Rice, so we're going to see a hybrid defense. They're going to have zone on one side of the field and man-to-man on the other side. And therefore, you know what? Hey, wait a minute. This isn't about me. It's about them. I'll set them up. Now, my bosses that oftentimes will ask, can we get a bit more from you in terms of your thoughts? But when you've got 4 or 5 people on the set in a show that's so tight as it is now, I'm comfortable knowing that it's not about me. The excellence will be in the way I have them look good. There's a scripture that I adhere to, which says, in lowliness of mind, esteem others more highly than yourself. And that's the road that I try to follow with them. Even, Brian, as you well know in TV, and boy, you being a superb listener to the long-winded JB, even if my boss says, JB, we got to go to commercial, you got 15 seconds. If I look down the dais and I see Brian Berger has his eyes up, his eyebrows, eyelids, they're open because he's got something he wants to add. He knows we only have 15 seconds. He's got to give me 5 seconds to say goodbye. I would prefer to go to Brian Berger and let him get that last bit that just popped into his mind. And he gets credit for that. He feels better that he's got a teammate who is unselfishly distributing the ball as a point guard. And it lends to a more cohesive and trusting show. You follow? I know you do. I got to get rid of that expression. I know you do. So that's what I try to do with the show to make sure that my colleagues are getting as much airtime to get out what they want as possible. And it lends itself to a much better show. We do have a Friday production call, a virtual, a Zoom, where we go over things. But to our producer's credit, Drew Kaliski, who doesn't get enough credit, he's a talents producer. Because Sunday morning, when we go in to have our final rundown before we go out there, he may hear in listening to the guys and the ladies something that hadn't been discussed before. He has enough confidence to change the order of things so that it speaks to what he knows the talent wants to share. And we go out there and we're much more enthusiastic because, again, it's been discussed all week long. But personalities and insight and preparedness will help us to at least establish a little bit of an identity in a very crowded field. And I could not be happier to know that the show this year, even though James Brown is not, one of the candidates for outstanding studio host or Jim Nance for play-by-play, the point is it's about the team. The show is getting recognized by being nominated. Could not be happier.
Well, I'm not just saying this. I think you're the best studio host I've seen in my lifetime for a lot of the reasons that you just said. You're like a point guard, right? You're getting everyone involved. And it's not about you, it's about them. And you can tell the selflessness that you have when you're doing your job. I got to ask you, Matt Ryan's joining the team. You brought in some new guys in the last few years, JJ Watt, who retired a few years ago, Nate Burleson, who I've had on this show, and Coach Cower. So the team has changed a little bit. What are your thoughts on the team changing? Because again, I know you can build chemistry with people over a long time. Phil and Boomer were on your show for a very long time. How's it feeling going into this next season?
You know what? And I'm sure you know this. It's a family, and um, I would be disingenuous if I said that there wasn't some disappointment
Mm-hmm.
because they've been family for decades. Literally just about decades. Boomer and I have worked together for a long period of time. They're hardworking guys. Phil Simms, there's no one in television, no one or radio who works in it harder than Phil, who knows the game. He's the expression that we use when we see somebody who loves out there practicing over and over and over again, Michael Jordan on the court or whomever. He's a gym rat. He's a gym rat. Boomer covers the whole range of sports. He loves it. It's his life. So yeah, I'm saying that because it does. There's some sadness there because they were teammates. But we're also big boys. We've all played sports. They have longer than me, and we understand that's a part of the business. So not only did I share my love from the depths of my heart with those two guys and emotional conversations back that way, but I also reached out to Matt Ryan, who is a pearl of a person, a gem of a person who knows the business well, knows the sport well. He's going to be embraced to welcome him aboard. Did that last year with JJ Watt. Look, he is and this is not a matter of being cocky. He's self-assured because he's at that level as a premier player and one who loves the sport and is a teammate and knows how to get his teammates fired up as well too. So we bring in a couple of guys who are primed for success, and we just want to make sure that the transition is as seamless and as quick as possible by having meetings, getting to know each other. Nothing beats getting to know with each other, breaking bread and learning about your colleague so that you'll know how best to play off of and to set them up.
All right, I want to respect your time, but I have a few
No,
more
no, no,
questions
we're
for you.
good, Brian. Go.
Okay. You just walked us through the process of the NFL today. I'm really interested in when you're doing an interview for 60 Minutes, or you've even anchored the CBS Evening News. How is that process different, which I imagine it has to be, from doing NFL today?
You would be excellent in doing those things as well.
I don't know about that.
No, 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 because even as I am admiring of how excellent a listener you are, how succinct, crystal clear your questions are, the process that you're following and getting as much insight from as well-rounded a look of me as you can in this conversation. It says this about you and my answer to that question. Anybody, I believe, who understands the mechanics of being a good reporter, broadcaster, those mechanics are a part of, going back to what I said earlier, the fundamentals of doing the job well, explaining the why, what, when, where, and how, all of those things, and listening and playing off of them, those answers, with a follow-up question that's reflective of your listening. Ryan, you're excellent at that. So if you were given an assignment to go cover Capitol Hill, if you were given an assignment, as I have been, to cover aerial skiing or to host hockey or to do auto racing, understanding the fundamentals of the sport so that you're credible is going to serve you well to be an excellent host or reporter across any spectrum. And that's how I approach what I'm doing. If I'm doing the evening news, it's the same thing when I was asked to host hockey. Clint Eastwood had a great line: "A man has got to know his limitations." I would not try to do hockey play-by-play. Doc Emmerich was one of the all-time greats at that. It's
Yep.
a fast-moving sport. You have to have that sport internalized and been around it for a long time. I didn't. So I said, I'll be the host. I will not be a play-by-play in hockey. A man's got to know his limitations. Humorous story. I think I did the job credibly when at the end of the year hosting the Stanley Cup Finals in New Jersey. I forget who the Devils were hosting in that Stanley Cup Final, and I gotta find some kids, they had a rendering of me, and they had it on like a cardboard sign, and they were coming up the aisle at the stadium in New Jersey where my host position was, and the little kid's sign said, James Brown, Godfather of Goal. Oh, Brian, that to me said I had met the mark decently of just doing a credible job. I remember telling when I was studying over the course of the summer, you talk about doing a job in a sport that you've not covered or in an arena, news that you hadn't. When I do the news, I make sure I go through all of the name pronouncers.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing that will ruin your credibility is if you mispronounce a name. You didn't do your homework. And oftentimes I will ask the correspondent if I had any questions. Not trying, I don't speak Spanish, but I know that Omar Villafranca, the L's and Y. So, you do it that way just to establish that credibility and to know something about the subject matter. So when I get into the bureau, I will read voraciously all day about the stories that we are considering covering on the air that night. So I've got a little bit of a glimpse of it, because much as John Madden taught us in football, preparation for the assignment. He would go on site to visit the home team on a Friday, the visiting team on Saturday. He and Pat Summerall, God bless them, they were there. John would ask all of the questions that he needed to have answered. Then Pat Summerall, but they turned to the team, the producer, the director, the associates. Is your bucket full? Meaning, do you have all the information that you need going into this broadcast? Because while the game is the thing, that's the focus, you want a great game and hopefully not have to go deep into that bucket. But as you know, inevitably, there are those games, whether it's a TV delay, lightning, whatever that's got a delay, you better have a deep bucket of some relevant material to share. That's how I try to approach a number of things. I got to tell you this last one. So I'm doing a gymnastics event with Mary Lou Retton.
Okay.
Thank God it was being tape delayed. It was being recorded. So I knew nothing about gymnastics, but I tried to study the basics. Mary Lou Retton was thinking that we were on live because the producer said, make like it is live, because it is live to tape. And we get to one of the floor exercises, and it's the balance beam. The balance beam. And I'm watching, so I'm asking questions. They said, JB, feel free to ask questions because you're going to reflect that viewer that may not know it extremely well. I asked a real basic, stupid question. It was the women on the balance beam. And I asked Mary Lou Retton, are the men going to perform their routine on the balance beam? Brian, she just looked at me. She didn't answer the question, hoping that it would click in a few moments. And I said, oh, I got you. Okay, let's go to this routine that such and such is performing, So again, I didn't know any better. Thank goodness it wasn't live, so they were able to edit that,
Oh, that's crazy. Well, and I mean, look at NFL Today is live, right? There's no editing of that. All right, you're getting this Lifetime Achievement Award. You've already talked about some favorite memories during this interview. Are there any others that stand out, one or two that you look back on your career and you go, this was one of the most memorable moments of my career?
The first one that comes to mind, and there are two, the other two that really don't relate to, if you will, hardcore sports. Probably speaks more about the heart that I have and the humanity I like to think. In no way patting myself on the back, but it's reflective in how those stories move me to tears. First memory is my boss, Ted Shaker, executive producer over the sports that I was doing, when he invited me to be an extra announcer during the first round of the NCAA basketball tournament because they needed extra announcers. And he saw me doing the Washington Bullets games. Actually, he saw me doing a Big East game for a television organization called TVS, a regional syndicator, I guess. And it was St. John's and Georgetown. And I was prepared for the game. And I felt did a very credible job. Little was I aware of the game. Of course, I don't look at where the map is about where the audience is and the whole. I just want to do a good job, period. The game was being televised into New York City. And he saw that. So he said, I want you to come and be one of the extra announcers, an analyst. Back then, I was working with Frank Herzog from Washington, D.C., the longtime then named Washington Redskins football play-by-play. And after doing a good job there, he said, okay, I know you're doing NBA. Let me have you come on board and do some work for us because we had the NBA at CBS then. And I got to be the B team at the half host, the interview show at halftime. Pat O'Brien was the A guy. So those things led to various opportunities. And my boss said, if you're looking to make a career out of this, you got to do the major sports, football principal among them, but also get experience doing all the other sports so that you aren't just pigeonholed in just being a big sport guy. You can cover them all, which is why I did aerial skiing and the Pan American Games and rock climbing and Tour de France, etc. All of those things. It was fun. But he says, okay, I'm going to give you a football game to do. Just be prepared for it. Don't try to get fancy. I've told this story a zillion times, but it's worth telling again. He says, now, when you get there to the stadium, we got a TV monitor. We'll keep track of everything on that monitor. It will have the correct time remaining in the game. Don't look at the stadium clock because the operator may have it wrong. We'll have the score. Watch that monitor and just keep it clean. Don't get fancy. I go through the first half of the game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm thinking, now this was dangerous. Man, football's not that difficult. Cockiness, overconfidence begins that precipitous slide down the abyss. We get to the third period of play. I'm caught on the action. Steve DeBerg's the quarterback. There's a handoff to James Wilder, the running back. He's at the 40. He's at the 50. He's at the 55. He's tackled at the 60-yard line. My producer gets in my ear, JB, there's no such thing as a 60-yard line in American football. Go to commercial. Now I'm shook up. I didn't look at the monitor, made the mistake. I looked up at the score and a clock in the stadium. I said, well, we're going to step aside and take a timeout with 8 minutes and 99 seconds left in the third period of play. We go to commercial. We come back. Dan Jiggets, who played football at Harvard, a friend of mine, teammate in the whole 9 yards, he covered for me. He said, for those of you who heard JB say there are 8 minutes and 99 seconds left in the game, he was actually trying to engage in a little intellectual exercise to see if you could make the conversion and say what he really meant to say. There were 9 minutes and 39 seconds left in the third period of play. So he made light of it. Thank goodness that game was only televised to the TV truck and the local Piggly Wiggly convenience store around the corner from the stadium. So it didn't hurt me. That was memorable. But the other two weren't hardcore sports. One, the climb of Mount Kilimanjaro, which, by the way, Brian Berger, occurred the week after the Loyola Marymount LSU game.
Wow.
I had to fly over to Tanzania to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I told my boss then, if I wasn't cutting the mustard as a network broadcaster, there are easier ways to fire me than to send me over to Africa to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. But I did that with Special Olympians who were so determined to show the world they were just as success-driven as able-bodied athletes. Jim Tolan, the producer, went on to great success in Hollywood. That show won Emmys. It was called Let Me Be Brave, part of the motto of the Special Olympians, a special climb of Mount Kilimanjaro. And the second one was when, for real sports, I got a chance to go to interview an Italian couple that went with their church over to Chernobyl to an orphanage to adopt a kid through their church. These kids have been deformed and impacted by the nuclear spill at Chernobyl. And the one young man they were going over to adopt was a double amputee in the orphanage. And when they got there, the other kids can be pretty rough. And they were really after this one kid. There was a tough-nosed young girl, Tatiana, and his name was Al. They obviously adopted the family's last name. Salomon is how the anglicized version is, but it's Salomone. They saw that this young lady, Tatiana, was protecting him. She had her leg amputated below the knee on one leg. Tough-nosed lady protecting Al. And they said there was no way they could adopt him and not her. Brought them back to the States. The emotional part of that story was the family had them so encouraged they could do anything despite their physical challenges, and that if they were to pray, that God would bless them. And Brian, the young boy, asked his new mom and dad, when was God going to bless him with his legs? And he went on and persevered. He made the U.S. Paralympic sled hockey team
Hmm.
and is doing very successful in the game of life. Those two stories meant more to me because it talked about the human spirit and the success and heights that it could get to, no matter be you Michael Jordan or those.
Yeah, amazing. All right, before I let you go, the Lifetime Achievement Award you're going to receive from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences at the 45th Annual Sports Emmy Awards, May 21st in New York City. That's going to be a special night, JB. Who's coming with you? I imagine there's a lot of anticipation for such an achievement.
I am, when I got the call, my boss, Sean McManus, the now retired chairman, and the exec with Natus, when they told me that, I was in the car heading somewhere and I pulled off to a side street and I couldn't say anything about 30 to 45 seconds. And they were asking each other, did we lose his signal? Did he hang up? I was, I was crying
Yeah.
because it just blew my mind. I had never even thought about anything like this. I certainly didn't work towards anything like this. I just wanted to be the best at making others look good and to do my job more than credibly so that I could be the point guard, the host, the mediator, the initiator, whatever you want to call it, that I could be. This is unbelievable when I look over the pantheon of awesome people in my business. I just hope I'm not up there as a babbling idiot. I'll try to think of something humorous to say to take it off because, unashamedly, unabashedly, I am a man of faith and a minister. Um, and I was known as the weeping minister at my church. So your boy can cry, but
That's okay.
it's unbelievable. My daughter will be there because she and my son-in-law, they have 4 kids and it's a school night, so they can't come up to New York. So she will come to represent the family. Of course, my wife, Dorothy, who has been alongside of me and helping me more than just paying platitudes, speaking platitudes. She is responsible for really shaping me into the kind of committed journalist that I am in doing things with excellence in mind. And then some other people who mean a lot in my life too, probably more from a professional capacity, because not everybody was able to make it up there. So, and obviously my colleagues. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you what, you are the best of us. And, I'm just proud to know you. And you have been a shining example, both, behind the mic and behind the scenes for a lot of people. You have made a big impact on me. This is an amazing full circle moment for me to have a chance to talk to you right now. And I'm really happy that you're being honored in this way.
Ryan, thank you. And thank you for your patience. Look, it's been a pretty challenging stretch, but I was not going to let that get in the way of the awesome people at Natus who are supporting this effort and your patience in trying to make this happen. No matter the personal challenges with a brother going through some real medical challenges and um, getting home from vacation, a desperately needed one that my wife and I hadn't had in a year. And the day after began a run of 3 funerals in 6 days
Oh,
with very close friends.
very
But it
sorry.
lets you know to truly enjoy and embrace life and do all that you can under the auspices of affirming love. To me, that is the answer to every challenge that we have out here. And I've stayed steady with that because even in the commentaries, that I was more than humbled that my company would come and ask me if I wanted to speak on certain things, whether it was the lack of women in executive positions, the lack of men of color in head coaching positions, the rise in anti-Semitism and hate, etc. I would always examine because I did not want to be anybody's moral conscience. But if there was an opportunity to speak out about what love can do and to try to add, hopefully, a genuine voice to the dialogue, then I was glad to do that. But this is more than humbling, and I'm very, very thankful.
James Brown, Sports Broadcasting Hall of Famer. He's going to get this Lifetime Achievement Award on May 21st. Like I said, you're one of the best out there. You're a real inspiration to me and many others. Thank you for joining me on Sports Business Radio.
Brian Berger, continued success to you.
Thank you so much.